We'll start with Pratham. They have the title called to Learn in 160 Characters. And Nishant and Annapoorni will cover their emphasis on digital solutions over the last 5 years. I mean, they've been working with learners across the spectrum between kindergarten, where they enter at 3, to entering adulthood at 18. And they're going to talk about the state of India and the way they have been grappling to create a repository of engaging resources for teachers, parents, and children, and how Pratham has approached this, also including an offline learning experience. So I'm just going to give the floor to you guys. And I don't know if you have pre-recorded or if it's going to be talk live.
I think we would be talking live. We already have a pre-recorded video on the website. Thanks so much, Kristen, for the great overview and setting it up for us. This is quite different. Last year, I was in DC for the conference. This time, we are miles apart, but at least the community is getting together, and happy to see that we are able to share something about what we are doing right now, because I feel more than ever, this is the time to learn from each other, and that's what we'll hope to cover in our very short session. So this is Nishant. I lead technology initiatives, digital initiatives at Pratham, which is one of the largest not-for-profits in India. I'll let Annapoorni, my colleague, introduce her. And Annapoorni, why don't you go ahead and talk about the particular topic?
Okay. My name is Annapoorni, and I work for the digital innovations team at Pratham as well. The Learning to Learn in 160 Characters is one of our main initiatives as a COVID response. When COVID struck and lockdown sometime in the middle of March, we realized that we wanted to reach out to our communities. Pratham has always been an organization that works both inside schools as well as in communities. We are used to working with parents and community stakeholders and children. And so when school stopped, we were also looking for ways to reconnect with the community. And one of our first response was to create WhatsApp messages and to share them across multiple different languages. And these WhatsApp messages were curated through the library of digital content that Pratham already has in about 11 regional languages. We put those WhatsApp messages together. The first set of messages were mostly around making your own mask, what is social distancing, what is coronavirus, because we understood that children in the community were also in the same uncertainty as we were. They also wanted answers. They also had questions. So the first attempt was to reconnect with them. And I'll quickly try and show one of the activities that we did in the beginning. Michael, if you could help me share the screen.
All right, yes, I'll share the video now.
Thank you. So, I think our initiative was also very much aligned to the theme of the conference, which is to play every day. The children were tense, the parents were tensed, and we wanted to give them something that was engaging, that was fun, and that had an element of learning in it. All our WhatsApp messages were broken into two parts. One was, play, and the other was studies or learning. And there was a science, math, language activity for learning. And for the fun, we used to have music, art, or theater-based activity, things that they could do at home with the material that was available to them. As soon as we started doing this, within a few days, we started getting responses from the community. But one of the major responses we got was that WhatsApp needed smartphone and needed internet connectivity, which was not available in most of the communities where we were working. We realized that more than 40% of
I'm sorry. Sorry, Annapoorni, we are having some difficulty listening to you. Maybe you could just repeat.
Okay. So we realized that about 40% of children in our villages, we couldn't connect with them because they did not have a smartphone or internet connectivity. So we had to think of something more innovative, something more fun that could reach them. And we started mapping each and every child that we used to work with to a smartphone or a basic phone or any digital device around them. And then we realized that many of them had basic phones, those phones without any internet connection. So we started creating SMS messages. The limitation of 160 characters essentially comes from there. And we wanted to see if we could create content for language, for math, for science within the space of that 160 characters. And we started creating this as well for children across the age group of 3 to 14. The message was simple. We would send out these 160 character message, which was usually had an activity that the child could do outside the phone. So the idea was that the child would read the message and perform an activity after reading it with the help of a parent or a facilitator in their community. The idea was that they could build their own projects and work with their friends in the community to do that. We got a lot of response. And typically, a Pratham person would follow up after the message was sent to ensure that the child received the message, that they complete the activity. And based on this, we were able to set up like a two-way communication channel, which helped us reach out to them, but also helped them give us feedback about whether our content worked or didn't work. And this was essentially the activity. We moved to TV, radio, IVR during the process and have been working with about 14 state governments in India and about 600 non-profits to give our content and see if more and more children can be engaged through the process. That's broadly it. I have one more video, if Michael could show that. Would like to add anything? There seems to be no sound.
It's okay. I think we got the context from the video. The video was about expressions that the children can make. And what Annapoorni highlighted here is very important, that we, rather than just setting up a one-way broadcast mechanism, we ensure that there is a two-way communication. Because learning primarily in a family setup, especially during this pandemic, has to be driven by parents, and parents need support. So our primary intention was to try and reach out to the parents along with sending these learning activities and telling them that you can do this fun activity or a game with your children, and they will learn something through it. So why don't you go ahead and try it? And our staff members or the state governments that we are working with, teachers of various departments, started taking it up and reaching out to the parents. A quick thing that I want to mention here is on the transformation that we took. Along with this activity of starting with WhatsApp, going over SMS, then to television, radio, and a lot of other mediums, I'll talk specifically about how our digital content, which we have been creating for the past 5 years, came in handy at this point. We had a lot of games that we had developed, and these were digital games which someone could play on a tablet. And all of these were designed for our digital intervention, where the tablet is shared between 5 children. Now, because of the pandemic, getting 5 children together is not advised. So what we did is we took those videos, got a few of the children on a video call, just like we are talking right now, and played a game with them and recorded that as a TV episode. And that TV episode was beamed across the state. So this was the kind of transformation we did of our individual learning game into a massive broadcast kind of a content, which helped us really create a lot of content very quickly, with the limitation of not being able to go out and shoot and so on. The kind of activities that we developed always had the aspect of fun and games in it. One thing that I think Annapoorni did not mention is the name of this initiative was Corona Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai. Corona is an obvious play on the name itself, but this literally translates to let's do some fun and some learning. Corona Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai, and that's where the structure of the messages, where it had a learning message, learning content, and content specifically about fun and games that you could do, was there. And that was the approach we followed, with a lot of other nonprofits taking it up, with a lot of state governments taking it up, and we have got tremendous response. I think we should stop there, and happy to answer any questions in the next phase. Sorry, Christopher, we can't hear you.
You are on mute. Really, I can't hear you.
Hi, Krister. Did you click the microphone on the bottom of the screen? Yes? Okay. Try leaving the chat and then just rejoining again, okay?
Michael, I told that I want to just play the pre-recorded video, but I just changed my plan. I will just do the real-time presentation if it is fine, because the context has been changed so much. So I just don't know is my presentation appropriate for the situation.
Okay, yeah, sure thing.
So who is the next?
Okay, yeah, so while we wait for Krister to rejoin, okay, I'm gonna add him back.
Okay.
And the next presentation is gonna be Phenomenon Technologies, okay?
Can you guys hear me?
Okay, I can.
Yes.
I can see Krista say it in just that.
Are you with me? Thank you. Yeah, then I'm back. I should have mentioned this when we started out. Of course, this is a first for everyone on the platform. I've spent some time on video platforms over the few months that we have behind us, but not this one. But I think we're back. The next speaker is Nkosana Masuku. He's the founder and CEO of Phenomenon Technologies. He is going to talk about social learning with 3D science models and their approach to offline ability using USB on the go. So as we had a little glitch, I'll just leave it with that and invite you to take the floor.
Thank you, Krista, for inviting me to take over.
I can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sana. Can you, Sonli?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so over for my presentation, I'm just going to highlight the key benefits of social learning. I'll present this. I already have a pre-recorded session as a startup format. So for people to get the general consensus of how we operate, I think that will be beneficial. So for now, I'll just go over the key capabilities, which I didn't really go over on the pre-recorded video, especially in regards to offline learning. So what we offer is what we call 3D models. We discovered that a lot of schools don't actually have models for students to learn science accurately. So the way in which we provide those models for schools offline, we have different criteria for each school, which some schools use the online method, which is the app currently available on the Google Play. But then for schools which are excluded, especially rural schools, we use a USB method whereby through the phone, they can access the models offline using the USB method. So that generally is how the students can be able to access offline learning through our revision app. And I'll let Michael present the actual video so that you can get the full consensus of how we do it.
Hi, my name is Nkosana Masuku. I'm the founder of Phenomenal Technologies. I'll be taking you through social learning using 3D models. Right, so I'm from Zimbabwe and I've experience in teaching in rural schools. So during that experience, I discovered that thousands of African schools don't have adequate models which are required for science learning. Therefore, science learning has become abstract to many students because the labs don't have the 3D models which aid in that learning. And you find that 67% of total exam candidates don't sit for their exams due to the shortage of those resources. And also you find that science revision methods have become very monotonous because of the ever-increasing digital platforms of social media and new directed ways of learning. So this matters a lot because you find that Africa needs 1 million scientists, according to research. More than half of the global population between now and 2050 is expected to take place in Africa, according to the United Nations. And youth will need particularly skills in STEM for them to be able to support that level of growth in a sustainable manner. And Africa currently has the least number of scientists per million people than the global average of 1,150. Science is a portable augmented reality lab which can project 3D science models through a smartphone. And using research methods of augmented reality, we found that this actually increases learning gains by up to 60%. So potentially thousands of science learning models in line with the curriculum can be stored all in a smartphone, making it easier for students to have access to these learning materials even at home, especially during this COVID crisis where a lot of school labs are closed. So the benefit of science is that it is a modern portable lab. Students can learn from applied 3D science models. It offers curriculum mastery through thousands of revision practice questions, and also social learning where students get to interact with each other and learn together through challenges in a gamified manner. So currently, we have a very big market size because you find that 50 million of students in Africa actually studying, and 1/3 of that have access to smartphones, while 1/3 of those students actually study pure sciences. And this really is a big phenomenon, especially if we are to reach a lot of students who are underprivileged to have that kind of support. So first of all, the traction which we've gained right now, we've become the first Zimbabwean startup to enter the Google Accelerator. Product has been recommended for adoption by the Ministry of Education in Zimbabwe. We've launched beta. We've also launched the official app, and it's currently available on the Android Play Store. We have a business model whereby students pay a weekly, monthly, or temporary subscription, then licenses to schools and partnerships with NGOs for us to reach those students who are mostly affected and don't have the access to those resources. So in an essence, our goal is to stimulate STEM interest in the youth so as to develop the next generation of scientists who will contribute to Africa's growth. And the team is made up of me, Nkosana Masuku. I've experience in education, as well as Heta Mafunga, who is our Chief Operations Officer with 7 years in digital marketing and 3 years startup operations experience. And we have our Chief Technology Officer, Nhlanhla Sibanda, who has 5 years experience in mobile development and is also a qualified educator. So we really hope to continue solving this task and growing beyond Africa, because this is a global phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for that. So I really want to also emphasize, especially with regards to reaching students who are peri-urban, because most of the students who are really affected by this problem are those students at rural schools. You find those schools, they do not have adequate labs. And the business model really which we are using to reach those students are partnering with organizations like World Vision. We're already talking to World Vision Zimbabwe in order to reach those students in a way that they can learn from those 3D models. And the good part is also through the social learning, the application allows for an intranet when students are connected locally, so that it does not use any data, and students can actually access all of the revision material if the school has installed the intranet for that specific application. So I think that's the key presentation which I wanted to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkosana, for that presentation. For all of you that have questions, I've seen there's been some comments while you've been giving your interesting talk. You can also, we will have a session afterwards. You're really touching on a very interesting subject in terms of STEM and the lack of resources in different ways over the whole continent, of course. Our next speaker, an X Prize winner, actually, is Kitkit School. Sooinn Lee is going to talk about their work on a child-driven tablet-based personalized learning system. Also focused on being self-directed at an early stage. So it's an early learning platform. And they've of course also been focused on being able to deliver in a very low resource community. I know that their initial testing with X Prize was done in a rural area in Tanzania, in Tanga. But I'll actually just leave it to that, and we're excited to hear what you have to say on offline ability. Sooinn Lee.
Thank you, Christopher. Michael, so I will just show my video and then we'll add some comment, because this is a pre-recorded video. So we didn't mention many things about our activity after the COVID-19 situation. So for this 7-minute video, I will just share that our learning as a game designer, how to integrate game, and what is the most important thing when we apply it to offline environment for a long time. And following that, after the video, I will just follow up with some of our activity we started after COVID-19 outbreak.
Hello, I'm Sooinn Lee, CEO and co-founder at Enuma. Today I will discuss about Kitkit School. This is a tablet-based app recently won the Global Learning X Prize competition. I was a game designer in Korean game industry for 10 years before starting Enuma. I got many industry awards about game design and children's app design. Enuma is a mission-driven company. We develop exceptional learning tools, especially for those who are struggling in learning, including those with special needs, to be independent learners. Independence, motivation, success is our philosophy I will discuss today. We won Global Learning X Prize competition last year with an application called Kitkit School. It is a game-based comprehensive learning solution that spans early childhood through early elementary level. It has so many games inside, game-based learning of literacy and math, and it also has book and video library, creative tools, and digital literacy curriculum inside. From 2017 to 2019, X Prize proved that children can learn basic reading, writing, math with tablet device only. Before the field trial, only 6% of learners can read one word. But after 15 months, 40% of learners can read full sentences. And among them, Kitkit School demonstrated higher learning gain and became one of the co-winners of this competition. Kitkit School is very unique because of the outstanding engagement it demonstrates through the field trial. This is a graph of children who connected to that device at least once per week. And you can see our children, our user group actually played 2 or 3 times more than those of competitor software. So today, I want to explain that how we can generate this high level of engagement. Independence is the most important thing. Intuitive UI UX, considering children's digital literacy level is really important. I want to explain the first impression of Kitkit School. We build the launcher together with the software, so children doesn't need to worry about unlock functionality or all the different icons. Then we carefully pointed down where to look and where to point until they experience the first game. A, C, X, B, plus, T, 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 Sun, 4 frogs, 2 lions, hen, dog, second, once children come into the software, we have to keep them motivated. We have many game-based functions like visual reward, collection of creatures, but more importantly, we try to make a room for them to play with peers by providing dashboard competition and free choice mode for collaboration. We believe that if we have engaging contents and have basic reward functionality, children will just keep playing. But to make it more fun, we can encourage children to invent their own rule of play with their peers. This is one example. What we do is making this green bird repeat what children said after showing them word card. That's it. Our goal is make children to learn, make children to be successful. So we added many accessibility functionality and the principle of universal design for learning for children to get enough scaffolding for the new skills. There is one functionality. If child press this word, it will say the word. So this child press each word to listen, then repeat the whole sentence herself.
Sí, a la esquina.
In Kitkit school, there are more than 15 months of content, all the games and curriculum stars and meta games. But we believe that just give some playground that children to choose what to do is as important as providing content. We just added a simple blackboard and drawing board with color crayon. The UI and UX is really simple to use, so it's really pleasure to draw. And we gave it to children who never saw 18 crayons before, then waited. Some children start to copy the word card they saw in the app. After a few months, we see amazing artwork that comes from the field. See this, they made word card, they practiced their math, and they just draw and write the name of those objects. And I believe that's actually ultimate outcome of all those games, all those learning activity we taught to children. That's all I want to share today. We try to provide the best quality self-learning tool to many learners in the world, especially in this difficult time that children need to learn by themselves, mostly at home. Thank you.
Hi, it appears we can't hear you. Could you try just leaving and then coming back again? Okay, so just request again.
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yep, I hear you. All right, as you just requested, should be on the screen in just a minute.
How's this? Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay. So after the COVID outbreak, we released Kitkit School for free until the end of 2021 through our website for free. So anybody can actually request a license through kitkitschool.com. Also, we made different version of Kitkit School for many different languages. One is Korean version for immigrant families in Korea. So it just started from last month. We are making Indonesian version for continuous learning for Indonesian learners with the help of 2 foundations in Southeast Asia. And also we are working for Spanish version of Kitkit School. So right now we just try to expand its reach to many different languages and culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Sooinn. Really interesting project with a global impact. It's impressive how you guys have gamified many different ways of learning to read. Actually working on many of the same elements myself right now, and I see you guys have been innovating on some stuff that I'm really curious about. According to my notes, we have one more presenter, Boukary. Are you here? I'm asking because I can't see Boukary. That's okay. There might be technical issues and so forth. I think we can then just go over to the session where we address some of the questions that might be. Michael, if you note some of the elements that come in the chat, I will start out slightly myself. I'll actually start with you, Nishant, just to get things going. Beside the offline perspective that we are covering in this session, what have been the largest or most important challenge, would you say, in terms of education in India? I mean, you're a continent in my eyes, in many eyes, and in mine included. And you have a number of states solving things differently, and you have large societies that are, coordinating within that continent. I would say, define as the most important COVID challenges in India.
Sure. Thanks, Christopher, for the question. I think when we try and define India, it becomes difficult because of all the diversity that we have. And it's a very great analogy of comparing it with a continent. We have got different languages, we have got different states, we have got different demographics. But most importantly, we have got a very wide range of sort of financial capabilities that parents have. And because of that, one solution that can fit all is definitely not going to work. So if I were to quote some data from the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is the central government agency looking after telecom, the smartphone penetration in India is somewhere around 50% and varies heavily by states. But if you look at India as an average, the smartphone penetration is somewhere close to 50 to 55%. And so is the internet connection as well. We keep hearing a lot of stories about how India is on this bandwagon of getting to more and more internet connections, millions and millions of them. But we are 1.3 billion ourselves. So even those millions do not make up the entire percentage. If we talk about the next lot, which is how many of them have got a regular cell phone, that number is actually close to 75 to 80%. And then there is a 10 to 15% which does not have access to either. So whenever someone is thinking of a solution, and a lot of different states have come up with different solutions, it always needs to make sure that it is catering to everyone's needs. So in India, I think the ecosystem of educational organization is quite rich, and they have been coming up with solutions right from using Google Classroom or online classroom for like private schools or what we call high-end schools, to programs like ours where we have a radio broadcast which is beamed every day from the top of a temple in the village, so that everyone in the village can listen to that radio program. So there's this whole variety of solutions. And it is important to understand that the entire country went under a lockdown on the same day. So 24th of March, it was all the children in India out of school from that day onwards. And it has been a challenge, firstly, because the medium of instruction is different across the country. So we don't have only English medium schools. We have got, as we said, we create content in 11 Indian regional languages. There are many more that we can't cater to right now. So all the solutions had to have a mix of all of these things, had to have the capability of multiplying quickly, being transformed quickly into other languages, and so on. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge. But I think over time, the states have been and the governments have been picking it up well, learning from where they can, implementing solutions. And I think the spirit of people from India has actually survived.
Thanks, Nishant. It's really, yeah, it's troubling times, but it's also exciting times. But I mentioned it earlier when I heard your talk. I mean, you really innovated in terms of different channels and different ways of approaching the problem of reaching the learner in a distinct way.
Yeah.
Nkosana, I want to drill in more on the cultural adaptability or cross-country adaptation of resources. I mean, India is a country with different regions and cultures and languages, but I mean, Africa, it's also very much so. I mean, you've chosen STEM sort of as an area. How would you say that STEM resources or the STEM resources that you are developing, how do they transport from country to country? from context to context. Is that something that can? The question is actually your resources. Can they be used across an array of African countries?
So thank you for that. Actually, that's a really a good question. And from the learning context in Africa, you find that Africa as a general, each country has its own syllabus. So for each resources are then tailored towards that. So when you're teaching, for example, I professionally am a science teacher for physics and chemistry. But you find when you're teaching, even here in Zimbabwe, we have two main curriculums. We have the ZIMS.
Nkosana froze a bit. I don't know if you guys can see him or.
I can hear you.
That's good. That's good. Let's just see if he unfreezes. While Nkosana unfreezes, Sooinn Lee, I'll actually pose some of the same question sets to you, because I know you guys have been testing as part of the X Prize competition in Tanzania. How did you or your team experience that sort of moving to another setting, moving to another user group, moving to another language? I personally had 2 years of my upbringing in that region, Tanga, so I'm specifically interested in that. But how did you see that coming from a Korean setting? I know always thinking globally, but how was that user testing in that rural area of East Africa?
I understand that your question is how we can work in different setting and different regions, right? So through the X Prize, the competition was held in rural area in Tanzania. So we actually set up several field test sites of our own in different regions Tanzania to avoid the conflict with Global Learning X Prize, and just observe and iterate continuously until we feel comfortable for children's data. The similar thing happened when we run our field test site in IRC with the help of IRC in Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh. So that story will be shared by people from IRC and Imagine Worldwide in this education as well. So in there, we build Rohingya language instruction on top of English language version, and just observe and try to iterate as much as we can. We just use the same method of child-centered learning and heavy iteration through the data in wherever we work. So for Korea, we have been working for Korean version for immigrant families with 6 different languages support with their parents' mother tongue. And we just started our first field test from Korea. And we believe that it will take 1 year that we will collect all the data and be really comfortable about the quality of the curriculum. So there is no other magic. We have actually B2C version that is widely popular around the world with our Todo Math and Todo English. It took actually 8 years to tune Todo Math with that is serviced with 8 different languages. And we are still feeling that we are not enough and there are so many room to improve. So there is not a magic thing. We are just seeing, observing, and iterating and forever.
I personally, I'm asking the question because I want to hear more of the experience. We have done a lot of translation and recontextualization of content across continents, and we see that, at least if it doesn't come from Europe, which is, I understand people, especially in Africa, are skeptical about that. But if it comes from India or it comes from another region in Africa or the other way around, it really, really flows really well. I usually use the Pratham book, Fat King, Thin Dog, as the example. I think he's translated into something like 200.
We are using many of Pratham book as well.
We are living in Berkeley, so one benefit is we can meet many expats and bilinguals around this area. So we always have a regional manager who come from that region in the team for all those different experiences. But I believe that we just continuously make failure and get pointed by local people and teachers and students, and just try to do our best to iterate it.
Yeah, I agree. And that methodology is fairly universal. So, Nkosana, welcome back. We all have our technical glitches today. I'll rephrase the question. It was your STEM resources, or in general STEM resources across Africa, and your take on that.
Yeah, so basically, like as I was saying, I think in Africa, like as we have different curriculums across each and every country as well. So like for STEM, it's much easier to have all of the students using the same resources, because like if you look at a science lab in general, each science lab has most of the models which are across all the curriculums. For instance, if you have a heart, the heart model will always be like the heart. The skeleton model will always be the skeleton model. So like it's actually easier for each student to adapt like the science application, because like it serves as a STEM portable lab in a way. And even if the curriculums are different, the context of the models still apply to whatever they are learning in their science subjects. So for instance, right now we've seen across our app adoption, like we have countries like South Africa, we have countries like Uganda, students coming from all these different African countries, even though the solution has been currently tailored for the Zimbabwean context. And also what we've realized, like we have students from the USA who are using the app, and especially from the UK, we have a large number of students from the UK, because like it's the resources are quite global. As long as the STEM resources apply to each science subject, students can be able to use all those augmented reality experiences, since like they have an access to a lab which has all those resources in a physical context. But with the application, they can then project those in a 3D manner. So it actually allows for each student, no matter where they are, to be able to adopt the solution.
That is good to hear. I must also mention that I was talking about Fat King Thin Dog. At one point, I addressed a group of people in South Africa about content from South Africa, because there were a lot of great book producers there. This is like 2 years ago, and I said maybe in 5 or 10 years, content from South Africa and India will be used in our country, in Norway. And these were really, really polite people, but they laughed slightly over this. It will never happen. And I can say for a fact now that our largest commercial TV channel just took resources earlier this year as part of COVID, translated them into Norwegian, and are running them on their own channel, including actually a few both from South Africa and of course from Pratham. So it's already happening also the other way around, where Europe is embracing quality content from other regions. Jacqueline has a question for Nishant and Annapoorni. And so now I would love to hear how many children you have been able to reach in the midst of the global learning disruption and re-strategy efforts. What engagement strategies have been most effective for reaching children and families during COVID-19? I think there are at least 2 questions there. Do you want to start, Nishant, or Annapoorni? You decide.
So Pratham typically reaches students in 2 ways. We work directly in communities and also in partnership with governments and NGOs. So directly, we send our SMS and WhatsApp messages to 100,000 numbers. So you can say about 200,000 unique numbers receive our SMS and WhatsApp in the direct programs. And through TV, radio, and other broadcast mechanisms, we reach across different states. So typically about 126 million children, or I can say so many million TV sets or radio sets that we reach. So that's a difficult number to quote. But yeah, we can say that smartphones, we reach about 100,000 smartphones, and typically same number goes for us. which is another 100,000. And these are across 12,000 communities in India and 21 states of India. So each message is converted into 11 versions or 11 languages. So that's how we try to reach out.
I can just also add on that many of the resources that have been produced by, for instance, in a Pratham, from Pratham and the context around are used by others. So are us included, and for instance, Google and their read-along app, which has really taken off since launch in May. Also a bunch of Pratham resources. They also have resources from us. So it's really hard to count exactly how many we reach, but the numbers have really risen dramatically during COVID-19 for every one of the global platforms. Celia Russell, thanks for asking, from Takato Foundation in Myanmar. She's asking how to work with any of these projects to deliver resources in Myanmar, and how should we go about this. So there will be a summary after the session. Please contact any of the speakers directly. If you have relevant direct questions, anything that you might find directly relevant for you. You are working with digital libraries, so there's a bunch of those here that would be relevant, and that would have resources in that is relevant for your context. I'm not exactly sure about the languages, but you have a few in Myanmar as well, including the Rohingyas. So my advice is to contact the speakers directly if you want to follow up. Any more questions, please?
Can I just answer, Jacqueline? I see the question was also asked to me. So in terms of reach, science started out as what we called Fundo VR. So Fundo VR was a project where students would go to different schools and give students those virtual reality headsets so that they could have excursions to different applications of science, like, hospitals, warehouses. Because also another factor which we found out is that students in those excluded communities can finish high school without ever going to a location where science is actually applied. So we used to do that, and from that we reached about 20,000 students. We were doing it last year, and we had launched it actually at the beginning of the year. So, but we realized that was not going to be very sustainable for us to reach like thousands of students. That's why we pivoted to mostly augmented reality, because with the virtual reality, it meant we had to go school by school with the headsets. But with the augmented reality experiences, students then could actually download the application wherever they are and project even those applied learning experiences into their living room and still get the same experience. Because what we've been tailoring mostly is applied learning. We do realize that there are a lot of e-learning activities or different startups or companies which are doing those, but we are centering mostly for students to have an applied learning appreciation when it comes to STEM. So with science, currently, we actually launched it 2 months ago in July, mid-July, and right now we've reached 1,000 students who are actively using the application.
Summary. Nishant?
Yeah, I know, Krista, you're the moderator, but I had something to turn back to you and actually ask. Now, one of the things that we realized most importantly during this pandemic, and I think I touched on it briefly also, is that the divide between those who have the means and those who don't has been sort of highlighted the most in this period. And at least a few of the approaches that we have been taking on making resources available freely, open source, so that everyone can access, having it in many contexts and so on, is now proving to be all the more important. And would like to hear your thoughts specifically, and also from Sooinn and Nkosana, on how are you working on trying to get this together so that the digital learning divide, because with these digital only opportunities, the divide gets highlighted all the more. So how are you trying to work on making this gap smaller, and what is the contribution coming from GDL especially?
Thanks for taking the seat of moderator. A very good question. So first of all, I totally agree. I think we're at a point now that is very different than we were 5 years ago, in terms of having content that is available and apps that are available globally. So 5 years ago, content in 100 languages was unthinkable. Today, I mean, we did a summary as part of our COVID push, and we amongst our partners now have learning resources for early grade reading for more than 300 languages. Meaning we have the content, so we need to do two things, and that is contextualize. That is why we're here today, talking about gaming as one of the options, and we need to reach the child on their terms. And I think contextualizing means translating further. It means gamifying resources, and it means adapting them to a setting that is relevant for the child at any given moment. And in this case, we're looking at them in a COVID perspective, being home in many cases, and at least out of school. So what we did early on was that we did that cross-platform search that we had planned for a few years, but put off, and we did that across 3 or 4 platforms, all depending on how you count. And we now have in freelearning.io, we have resources across 150 languages, and we'll top out at 250 by the end of the year. But I have to say, to be a bit sort of down to earth on this, we need to push more on the infrastructure to reach children where they are, because we have the content, we have the games, we have high quality resources, but I see that there's a gap in terms of reaching at least the most marginalized children, because those who are reaching as a new learner today are those that are going online for some reason, and those are not the most marginalized ones. They're actually the ones that have some sort of funding, that has some sort of status, that would be of the right gender, if they're boys, right? So if we're looking to reach the most marginalized, our government, we're looking at approaching this from a more infrastructural side. And that is why we're also engaged in a more global initiative for digital public goods, is what we call it. We're also working with an Indian think tank on this. So that's my approach. I think we lack right now the push to reach children where they are, but we have the content and we have the games. Anyone else wants to chime in on Nishant questions, please?
I think for us, how we're actually trying to tackle that, what we did is right now we've partnered with the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. So once schools open, we're then able to use them in a way as to promote that kind of learning, because it means we do have access to all the data. And the good thing is here in Zimbabwe, every term, usually when things are normal, teachers gather up from all the schools, the different headmasters and headmistresses all gather up, and the ministry gives opportunities for all these people who are adopting new solutions to actually talk to those who are responsible for the authorities responsible for the children. So it becomes another way to actually increase adoption in those schools where learning isn't really taking place in an applied manner, like for us, which are doing 3D models for science learning, and then strike partnerships with the different organizations who also want to impact learners in those areas. So I think that's the approach which usually here in Africa mostly goes through place.
Kyung-Lee?
Yes, I also want to emphasize the importance of accessibility and think of the marginalized learners even in wealthy countries. So in United States, the report said at least 20% of learners doesn't have devices or internet access. And even there is an internet access, many of learners just doesn't have environment to focus on digital-based learning. So I believe that game-based learning, really strong motivation is as important as the digital contents right now. But also we have to point that many of children with special needs or who need extra support actually doesn't have any accessible contents at this moment. We are working for immigrant families in Korea. They are actually 3% of the population. But right now, after the COVID, we just realized the importance of that type of accessibility tool that is that provide extra support for primary 1 or 2nd grade learners, or can be implemented to any low-income families, immigrant families, and other children who is actually disadvantaged from the society. And by having that type of software, we can actually push local government or the society to have more think about those who doesn't have primary access to education at this situation. So when we just think about the digital and game-based learning, so on, because of infrastructure is not evenly distributed, we just focus on the mainstream learners first, because it's the easiest way and the most effective way to spread actually those type of method. But I really want to encourage the whole world to think about marginalized learner the first, because they were the most struggling learners even before the pandemic, and right now mostly just disconnected to any form of the learning. So I know just raising the voice for them actually can get some of attention to the government or the infrastructure investment to those learners at first.
Thank you, Sooinn. That's a really important area. And as you mentioned, they were already marginalized before this pandemic. Their situation is not getting better as we move forward. We're nearing the closing end. I'm actually going to, because we have a very lively group of speakers, I just want to challenge you all to sort of, because we're talking about offline ability here, and we've covered that really well. Are there other, I mean, you covered one that is accessibility, which is really important to also think about in this perspective. But as you guys are thinking about developing new games, are there new challenges that will make the next, not pandemic, but the next extreme situation that will help globally, that would make it easier to move fast and to reach many? Are there one or two specific things that you would say would make it easier to embrace the idea of learning for many across continents during something like COVID? I'll start with I'll actually start with Nkosana. He just left. Then I'll start with you, Nishant.
Thanks, Esther. So I think one of the crucial learnings that we have had, and I think this was always something that we embodied, is that parents' participation and community participation is a must. Now, in all our game design, whatever we are working on, whether it's online or offline games, the community members, the parents, the siblings are playing a very important role now. And continuing that, I think, is very important, because in this period, one of the things that parents have realized more than anyone else is that they can be teachers as well. And this is something that we have to continue, so that in an instance of a school closure or something like this, we don't actually fall prey to challenges of not having the reach and so on. So the first thing, I think, is parents' participation and community participation. And the second, I think, is designing for the lowest common denominator. And I think we touched on that as well, that along with making sure that everyone has accessibility, and I think that leads to a bigger question on how the infrastructure will get there. Post the pandemic, would we have the money to invest in that, considering the kind of investment that is going into health and infrastructure and reviving the economy? Designing for the lowest margin would be very important. So simple things, for example, that a parent can replicate with the child, which is a game that they can play, and they get the instructions on how to play and organize the game, would be crucial. So parent participation and designing for the lowest margin would be important to make sure we continue.
In our case, we have different challenge. We actually always aim the highest quality of game design and the best learning outcome. It's expensive. So localizing that type of method to other languages are also as expensive as developing it. So even though we are in a full the motivation to expand Kitkit School to many different languages, it's really hard to find a donor who can actually feed for localization and contextualization to different languages. The problem of software is this: for book, I believe that translation for books are relatively easier, and it can be done for look what it is, each countries and each people on their own. But localizing software, contextualizing software actually require quite some level of technology engineers, technical skills. So sometimes it's very hard to find any engineer who can localize those open resources on their own to their own country with a really high quality. But in the era of software-based learning, digital-based learning, I believe that the quality actually determines the learning outcome. So we are still struggling to find a way how to localize our software, how to contextualize our software to many different cultures those in needs, but couldn't afford to localize it on their own.
I think in our case, I agree with what Nishant was saying, where resources actually have to be built, especially from the ministry perspective. This has been an awakening to say, right, especially these marginalized schools, for them to start an e-learning perspective, there was no way completely for us to be able to do that. And now, it's high time for resources to be actually built upon, where then these digital platforms becomes easier for the students to access, because especially here, in African countries, you find especially rural schools, most of them don't even have the computers for them to start, maybe, or tablets for them to really equip with digital learning. And also the network becomes a problem, even if it's going to be offline. I know some of the resources will need to be downloaded. So heavily infrastructure really, it relies on the development of the infrastructure for e-learning and all these other offline games to be actually harnessed by these communities.
Thank you, Nkosana. Annapoorni, do you have anything to add to Nishant's comments? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Annapoorni, can you hear us?
Yes.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just want to mention that you all touch upon interesting challenges and possibilities. I think I want to comment on your last sort of thoughts on complexity versus simple translations on Yili. I know that, so we have developed from the Norwegian side something called H5P, interactive open source element that is really a very simple, very simplistic way of creating interactive content. And we, in many ways, thought it was going to be too simple and too plain, but it has traveled the globe. So when I met Nishant last in India, I tried to introduce him to this, and he said, no, I know about H5P a long time ago. So he's already been exploring how to use it in his platform. That originated in the Arctic, in a small town called Tromsø, in just where I come from. So I think the strength of simplicity and a sort of low bar, as Nishant mentioned, is that it can travel far. The weakness is that you have to make some compromises. I totally agree with you. The complete structure of learning is much more complex than that. I think in the future we might have to land somewhere in between for the global solutions. I want to thank everyone because in my notes I think we are at the last minute. We just passed. I want to thank you guys for joining as speakers. It's been truly interesting and to talk to you, especially at this point of the global pandemic. I want to thank everyone who participated. I want to encourage you guys to keep following the conference. There's still 2 days and 5 hours and 14 minutes to go. There are new sessions that you could follow as they emerge. I see that, and that Tony has commented in and said, thank everyone. I want to say thank you, Tony, for putting this together. You're one of my favorite people, really pulling together yet another conference that is inspiring to take part in. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the participants. I hope to see you guys in the next sessions over the next 2 days.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.